Hello, Incredible Moms. This is Crystal Evaristo with the Incredible Moms podcast, where we discuss getting pregnant, being pregnant, having babies, being a mom, and so much more. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hello.
Hey, Crystal, it's Lauren Engler. How are you?
How are you?
Good. Yeah, well, thank you for having me today. My name is Lauren Engler, and I am a certified pediatric sleep consultant. My business name is Via Graces. I actually chose my name based off my oldest daughter. Her name is Olivia Grace, and she is the reason I became a sleep consultant. And so when I was becoming a sleep consultant, I thought that it was very fitting to name it after my daughter, who kind of pushed me into this business. And with that as well, I think everything in parenting needs to be done with a whole lot of grace, because parenting is hard. It is ever changing. Our kids are ever changing. And so Via Graces was kind of a perfect name for my business. So I became a sleep consultant about a year and a half ago. And like I said, my now 3-year-old Olivia is the one who kind of pushed me into this business. When she was born, she was actually a fairly good newborn sleeper. It wasn't really based on anything we were doing. She just happened to sleep fairly well. But when we hit the dreaded 4-month regression, which I'm not sure if you remember with any of your kids, did that hit them pretty hard?
You know, I had never, out of all three, I had never really heard of a sleep regression until this last one.
Okay.
So I don't know a whole lot about them, but I just know there were certain points where it was a nightmare versus not so much a nightmare.
Absolutely. And I had never actually heard of the 4-month regression, but it hit us. And so I very quickly learned what it was. But so the 4-month regression is essentially when kind of a newborn sleep cycles transition into being more like adult sleep cycles, which is why a lot of babies at 4 months old, whether they've been great sleepers or terrible sleepers up until that point, we generally see things get harder, whether temporarily or long term. And in our case, things got hard, and they stayed really hard because we had no idea what we were doing. We hadn't changed anything we were doing, and all of a sudden she was waking up constantly. We would try to rock her or nurse her to sleep, and she would pop right back awake. And we were dreading bedtime. She woke up multiple times throughout the night. I just got into a pattern of getting up, nursing her, laying her back down, getting up, nursing her, laying her back down. And so from about 4 months to 10 months old, she was probably waking anywhere from 4 to 7 times a night. And we would just repeat the process. Her naps were short. She was waking up early in the morning. And I was exhausted. I was also teaching at the time. So I taught kindergarten through 2nd grade for 8 years. And I just felt like by the end of the school year, she was 10 months old. And I was like, something has to change. I'm not the teacher I want to be. I'm not the mom I want to be, the wife I want to be, the friend I want to be, because I'm not sleeping and we have no consistency here. And so I actually, I didn't really know a lot about sleep consulting at the time. So just from doing different research online, we were able to kind of piece together, essentially a little plan to try to get her sleeping. And it thankfully worked, and it works quickly. And it wasn't until she was actually sleeping through the night and falling asleep on her own for naps and bedtimes that I realized how sleep deprived I was. And how much sleep I really needed to catch up on. And from there, I was just kind of on a little crusade to keep her a great sleeper, to help other friends who are having a challenging time with their kids. I certainly was no expert, but I've always loved all things kind of pregnancy, labor, baby, parenting. And so my friends and I would try to brainstorm different solutions, whether it was for, my daughter or their kids. And so it just kind of got me thinking into, okay, so I'm a teacher by trade, and I love kids. And I see this problem in my own life and in the life of my friends and my community. So how can I kind of combine all those things together? And that's when I started learning more about the field of sleep consulting. It was very fitting. I was pregnant with my second daughter, Avery. She's 1 now. I was pregnant with her when I actually became a sleep consultant. So I was not only able to help my friends and, kind of the greater community that I've gained since becoming a sleep consultant, but I was able to actually use my own knowledge and skills now on my second daughter, that we didn't have to go through the crazy roller coaster that we went through with Olivia. I knew that, of course, newborn world is going to be sleepless. There's going to be a lot of night wakings and, feedings and cuddling, which is a great and good thing. And I also do strategies to kind of pair alongside those to help her continue moving in a path of sleep. So, I've got a 3-year-old and 1-year-old, both of whom I use my kind of techniques and plans on because they're real people. And of course, they have some, rough nights here and there, but I thankfully now know how to approach it rather than kind of flailing like I was with my first daughter. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and in my sleep consulting business.
That's awesome. So what did you end up coming up with for like your plan when you were doing it kind of on your own with your first?
So a big piece of it was honestly like recognizing when she was tired, when it was bedtime, recognizing the importance of a routine. We liked the idea of having a bedtime routine or a nap time routine, but we just didn't really stick with anything because we just were in survival mode. We needed her to sleep. So
Right.
we kind of came up with a bedtime and nap time routine that whether it was my husband or me putting her to bed, we were really consistent with it. Rather than nursing her at the end of the routine, I would nurse her at the beginning of the routine so that she wasn't, being tempted to fall asleep on the breast. And then we laid her down. Now, to be totally honest, when kind of talking to people and asking them questions about like, what should I do? I felt like I was left with 3 answers of, okay, you can either co-sleep. And I was like, well, I don't want to do that. My husband really didn't want to do that. So that wasn't an option for us. You can just let her cry, or you can just wait until she grows out of it. And because co-sleeping, like I said, just wasn't an option for us, waiting until she had grown out of it. She was 10 months old and I was exhausted. I couldn't wait any longer. And so to be honest, we let her cry. And it's funny looking back because as a sleep consultant, when I'm working with families, I never tell a family, just let them cry and walk away. They'll figure it out because there are so many other things that we can do. But at the time, I thought that was the only thing I could do. So the first time we laid her down and I sat outside of her little door. She slept in our walk-in closet because we were in a 1-bedroom apartment. And I sat outside that closet door listening to her scream, and it was awful and terrible and horrible. And I was ready to give up several times. After about 30 minutes, she quieted down, was sleeping. I was texting my husband every 2 minutes, like, she's still crying. Should I keep doing this? Like, what should I do now? Thankfully for us, it was kind of one rough falling asleep. And from there, she honestly started connecting her sleep cycles through the night much more quickly, falling asleep for her naps well. The reason I say kind of that or I guess to rewind a little bit, so we technically kind of just had her cry and figure it out. But like I said, looking back, I don't tell my families to just let their children cry. There's often going to be crying involved in sleep training because that's our kids' only way to communicate change or kind of to protest that they don't understand what's going on or they don't like what's going on. But I never ask a parent to just lay their child down and walk away until they fall asleep because I don't actually think that gives kids the confidence and the peace that I want them to have for sleep. So while with my oldest, we essentially she had to cry for one night, about 30 minutes, and the rest kind of clicked into place. Like I said, kind of with the routines, with understanding her tired cues and when she was getting sleepy. But I would say that it was only kind of a little Band-Aid. So she was a great sleeper at home, but anytime we would travel, anytime she would get sick, her sleep would go out the window, and it felt like we were constantly having to go back and kind of retrain her. And so, too, not only was my sleep training kind of coming at the perfect timing when I was pregnant with my second, but we were also moving around a lot kind of shortly after and when my baby was born, waiting for our current home to open up. And so my Olivia then was 2. Her sleep again went haywire because we didn't have a lot of consistency anywhere in our life. And again, for a 2-year-old, you can't just lay them down and walk away and let them scream. It didn't work. And we didn't know what else to do. And so it was perfect timing that I just come back from training. We started moving around a lot. And so I actually did a little sleep plan on her just as I would with a 2-year-old now. With a lot of families, they actually start with the parent like sitting in the room while the child is falling asleep. And through the plan, we work on slowly pulling the parent out of the room so that we don't want the parent to have to be there forever. We want to have that freedom of laying our child down, walking away, knowing that they're going to fall asleep. But we also want to make sure the child has confidence. They feel supported in that process. And so, sleep training, Olivia at 10 months old looked a lot different than kind of re-sleep training her at 2 years old because I actually knew what to do. And then teaching my newborn at the time, Avery, sleep skills kind of from the start. We really didn't have to officially sleep train her because we were using a lot of techniques right from the get-go. So it's definitely changed our world of parenting quite a bit.
So that was actually going to be one of my questions. So is it possible to sleep train a newborn?
So it's not technically sleep training. Kind of when we talk about sleep training, we there's generally going to be some sort of crying involved. The goal is to, after a certain number of days, be out of the room so the child can do it independently. With newborns, they really don't have the ability to self-soothe. And so it's really not fair to have any sort of crying involved because they don't yet have that ability to self-soothe. That actually kind of comes around the 4-month mark when those sleep cycles adjust. So that's when more official sleep training can happen. But there is still so much we can do with those newborns. Again, it involves a ton more comfort than we might do with some of our older babies who need a little bit more space to figure it out. But with newborns, a lot of it is watching the clock, making sure they're not getting overtired, having the sleeping environment nice and dark, have the white noise there, swaddling them up those first several weeks to help them, feel comfortable and cozy, and then really supporting them to sleep, in their bassinet or in their crib as much as possible. Working as much as we can on keeping them awake during feedings. In those first couple of weeks, it's nearly impossible, which is okay. But as they keep getting more and more alert, trying to keep them awake with feeding. So when I work with newborn families, the plan that we have in place is certainly not to get them sleeping through the night. That's not, developmentally or physically appropriate. But it's just to start establishing those sleep skills so that as they keep getting older, a lot of the newborn families I work with don't really have to officially sleep train once their baby hits 4 months old because they've had a lot of those skills already. So it's more coaching, and there's a lot more hands-on involvement with newborns. But yeah, there's definitely a lot that we can do so that it doesn't have to be so sleepless for as long as it might be if we don't have any of those techniques.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny because a lot of the things you're saying, like I've tried like little different things, except for the beginning. It's always like just nurse them till they pass out, basically.
Totally.
And then you find yourself in a predicament where that's the only way they know how to fall asleep. And you just have to do that every single time.
Yep, exactly. I've been there.
Oh, it's horrible.
It's sweet sometimes, right? Like there are really sweet moments. I tell my families, it's like there were several times where I enjoyed nursing her to sleep and I could transfer her and it worked beautifully. And there were nights where rocking her to sleep was fairly quick and it was wonderful. And I loved holding my sleeping child. And then it became impossible and she would wake up and it was frustrating and it took forever. And so that was where I was like, this just isn't working for us anymore. There's got to be another way.
Right. And I work night shift 3 nights a week. So on the nights that I'm not working, my husband would have to make sure there's a bottle sitting there ready to go. So he wouldn't have to get up, prepare a bottle or do any of that because it's not like he can just pop the baby on his boob.
Exactly.
So yeah, it becomes a vicious cycle. Even now when we try to keep him on our little one on a sleep schedule.
Yep.
It's hard if we're not both on the same and like wavelength, I call it. Like if he's not doing the same exact things that I'm doing during the week, we're never going to get any success out of this because he was a good sleeper for a long time, like probably the first 5 months, like you said, maybe 4 or 5 months. And then we moved here when he was that old, moved to North Carolina, and he just stopped sleeping through the night. And I thought it was because we were in a different place or whatever. Like he just would not sleep. And I'm like, what happened to my perfect baby? I would have to wake him to get him to wake up to eat. And now here he was waking up, like you said, 6-7 times a night. And I was losing my mind.
Yes. Yep. I have totally been there. I know exactly how you feel.
How long on average for like a child that quote unquote was in his terrible twos, how long does it usually take to get them on like a sleeping schedule? Like if they have really bad sleeping habits and to like break those habits, like on average.
Yeah. So with older kids, so kind of starting around 18 months is when my toddler package begins. Before then, we're in the baby package, which usually for babies kind of 4 to 17 months is usually a 2-week plan. For toddlers and older kids, like I said, starting at the 18-month mark, it's a 3-week plan. Just because as they get older and there's more language involved, that language piece is super helpful on the parent front so we can talk through a little bit more of what we're doing. But it's also a lot more challenging because there can be a lot more protest. It might not be as much crying, but more of the like, but I want water and I want one more story and I don't want to go to bed right now, which can make it more challenging. So with the older kiddos who have kind of more years of habits behind them, they've got a lot more communication there. It generally takes about 3 weeks. There are some kids who were on that 3-week plan and within a week, I'm like, oh man, like my job here is done. You guys are doing great. Everything kind of has fallen into place quickly. Whereas on the other end, I have a family every once in a while who there's just kind of a lingering challenge sticking around. And so I stick around for another week or two to make sure that, like I said, challenge kind of dissipates. But in general, it's about 3 weeks from start to finish.
Okay. And do you go to people's houses? Or are you doing it virtually? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's interesting question you asked. So when I started, like I said, about a year and a half ago in the summer, I had every intention of working from people's houses, so that it could feel a lot more personal. I could be there, I could look at the child's room and help them figure out what we could do to make it darker or how we can arrange furniture, to make it work well. But the families that I worked with, kind of from that July to October, were all distant. None of them were local. Which was great because I can do it all over the phone or via Zoom, through Google Docs. So for those first couple months, all of my experience was virtual because those were the families that that were coming to me to help them. And then I had my daughter in October, and so in newborn world, I took a couple weeks off, and then the families that I helped, most were actually local at that time. But because I had a newborn, I wasn't comfortable, leaving for a couple hours at a time. And then when I was ready to kind of come out of newborn zone and start going to people's houses, COVID hit.
Of course.
And so I certainly wasn't going. So in the future, whenever life kind of gets back to normal, if there's a local family who would like that kind of in-home support, there are different options for whether it's just going for when we actually go over the plan. So when I go over a sleep plan with a family, it generally takes anywhere from about an hour to an hour and a half. And so that would be some way that I could go to their house and kind of sit with them as we walk through the sleep plan rather than doing it over the phone. I've not done this yet, like I said, because of the kind of the timing of when I started and what was going on in life. But there are options for down the road of some families, more so with babies than with older kids, but like, hey, can you actually stay for the first couple hours and help us walk through the plan for the first night? And so there are different in-home support options like that where I could actually, help the parents go through the routine. I would definitely want the parents to do the process of helping them fall asleep, but I could be, on the other end of the monitor, on the other end of the phone saying, hey, now you can try this, and let's do this, so the parents feel even more confident in what they're doing.
Yeah. Kind of like I don't know if you've ever seen Super Nanny.
No.
She would kind of guide the parents okay, no, now you do this. And she's on the other side of the wall and telling them, do this and do that. And don't give in because these kids are stubborn. They know.
Yes, exactly. That would be the hope of what I'm able to do for local families once all of this is over.
Yeah, hopefully. In your training, do they recommend any kind of melatonin or kind of sleep aids, such as a white noise or playing music to help them sleep or anything?
Yeah, so great questions. So white noise is a great tool. Kind of from newborns all the way through. Honestly, even some adults sleep better with white noise. So white noise is great. When I work with families, I almost always suggest they have white noise running the whole night. We don't just want it running as the child's falling asleep, because if the child were to wake up or stir in the night and something looks or sounds different than when they first fell asleep, that could shake them up a bit. So having white noise on all night long is super helpful. Music actually is not as helpful. So where music can be a helpful relaxer, maybe in the bedtime routine or while our kids are in the bath, or I like always ending our bedtime routine by singing my girls a song. But actually having music on while kids are falling asleep or staying asleep, that music actually makes their brains work a little bit harder because it has to focus on the rising and the falling of the tune or the volume changes or if there's words. Their brain has a lot more to focus on with music. And so it actually keeps them in a lighter sleep where we, of course, want them getting in that nice, deep, restorative sleep. And so white noise is the best with that. Thinking about melatonin. So there are certainly, I've certainly heard of families where their child just seems to need that melatonin supplement. But most of the time when I'm working with a family, I say, hey, are you comfortable pausing the melatonin for now? Or we might even just kind of work even on a weed down process of it. Because more often than not, with the older kids especially is where we see a lot of the melatonin come out. There are usually more kind of behavioral components or just routine components that we can change. And like I said, kind of teaching kids those sleep skills, because sleep is a skill that we can teach. It's not just like, okay, we just have to wait until he kind of figures it out on his own. There are kids who seem to figure it out on their own. I wish that I had those kids, but I don't. But sleep is thankfully a skill we can teach our kids. We don't have to wait around for them to figure it out. So for the families who are using melatonin, when we start working together, we talk about, whether they want to stop it right now or kind of work on a wean down process. But I would say 99% of the time, the melatonin is not actually necessary because our bodies produce natural melatonin, that sleepy hormone, as our bodies are preparing for bed at night. And so really getting those routines in place, figuring out a schedule that, age appropriate and works for our family when it comes to your child's sleep, and then working on kind of those with the older kids, especially, there are a lot of, bedtime boundaries and expectations we talk through. And so once we are able to work on those components of sleep, those melatonin supplements really they just don't seem to be necessary. And there's just not a ton of information out there about melatonin, even, the long-term effects and such. So as much as possible, when I work with families, we talk about how we can either, again, quickly or slowly kind of pull away from that melatonin and just focus on the actual act of sleep and kind of that environment and routine.
Yeah, a lot of people, I had reached out on my Facebook maybe a month or two ago, just at my wit's end. I mean, you think by the third time I'd kind of know what I was doing as far as getting my child to sleep. But it had been such a long time and I just basically had forgotten everything. So I just had any and all recommendations, please. Like I just don't even know what to do at this point because he just could not fall asleep on his own. And someone had recommended that and a few people had, and I said, I'm a firm believer that kids need to know how to fall asleep on their own. I don't want him to become dependent on anything to fall asleep, like music or, the TV or all stuff is going to, like you said, it's going to overstimulate his brain before he's trying to sleep. The system that we had come up with, I had tried melatonin a couple times in the beginning because we were on a terrible schedule. Like he'd fall asleep in his high chair probably around 11. Like I'm a night owl and so is my husband. So it seems late to a lot of parents, but it was around, and it was kind of late in our eyes, but around 11 or 12, he'd end up just passing out in his high chair and we'd put him in his bed. And that was so like watching Cars or something, like something that he would just kind of zonk out and that was it. And of course that wasn't feasible. He'd wake up by 3-4 o'clock in the morning, probably want to watch Cars again and be right back at it. So we ended up doing melatonin for the first few days just to make him sleepy enough and kind of sitting next to his bed, his toddler bed, and just rubbing his back and like singing him a few songs and just sitting there until he fell asleep. And then eventually we, like you said, move further away from the bed and kind of like tell him it's okay. And then it was getting to the point where we would leave him in his room after doing all the little things and he'd go to the bunk bed stairs because my older boys have their bunk bed in the room. And he'd fall asleep on the bunk bed stairs. He was like, he was adamant that he was not going to sleep in his bed. Like he just, but eventually something clicked in his head. He realized, okay, I guess sleeping in my bed isn't that scary. And now he'll actually hold our hand and go straight to his bed and put his blanket on and he'll be done with it. Yeah. So I don't know how he just kind of learned, but I think we just followed the same routine every single night. Yeah.
That consistency with older kids especially is so key.
Yeah, it was a long haul. It's still not perfect, but
absolutely. And you're totally right with but I have older kids. Every child is so different. It's like we could be doing the exact same thing, but every child is so different that you just never know. Again, one might just naturally be a great sleeper and the other might need a lot of work. And that happens all the time when I work with families of, their one child was an angel and the other one, they needed all the help they could get. Yeah. So
that's a really nice way of putting it. Cause I was going to say he's like the equivalent of 5 children in one. So,
right.
How long should a bedtime routine take? Like, should there be a maximum? Like, it shouldn't take more than 15 minutes to kind of go through your routine and get them down, or like, how does that work?
So I generally recommend the bedtime routine being kind of in the sweet spot of about 20 to 30 minutes long. So if it's much less than 20 minutes, even if an older child's able to verbalize like, okay, I'm getting ready for bed, we want their body to actually start processing, hey, this is the bedtime routine. I'm getting ready for sleep. We want it to start to naturally release that natural, like I said, that natural melatonin in our kids' bodies or in our bodies. Routines are just as helpful for adults, but much less than 20 minutes, their body's probably not going to have enough time to really prepare for sleep. Whereas on the other end, if the routine goes much longer than 30 minutes, either they and or their little bodies will probably forget that sleep is even coming. It will just be like another part of the day. So finding that sweet spot, like I said, of about 20 to 30 minutes of the bedtime routine seems to be really helpful to setting up our kids with the most success as they get ready for bed.
Okay. And do you, as far as nap times, do you think that that should be about the same? Because that's one thing that we have not accomplished in our household yet, is now we have to either lay down with him or let him fall asleep, like after he's ate his lunch or something. He'll usually fall asleep in his high chair.
Yeah, and as you know in your living right now, so naps are often the hardest part of the sleep puzzle. When I work with families, I say that most of the time, bedtime and overnight will start falling into place a lot more quickly than nap times will, just because daytime sleep is harder than nighttime sleep. At night, we have melatonin on our side. During the day, we just don't. So naps are in general just kind of harder. So routine is still really helpful for nap time, but we can actually cut it down to just about 5 to 10 minutes, where we don't want to go straight from lunch into our child's bed or straight from playing into our child's bed. So having some sort of, okay, we're going to change your diaper or go potty, we're going to read 2 books, and then I'm going to sing you a song and lay you down. It can be something that quick for the nap time routine, but we do still want a good 5 to 10 minutes just to help them, register, okay, now we're transitioning from this activity to sleep, to give them a little bit of time to kind of settle there.
Okay. And that was actually a question I had as far as like diet and mealtime. Do you recommend any kind of, obviously no sugar or anything before bedtimes, but anything that you would avoid, or like how long between meals and bedtime, even at night?
Yeah. So there's not, it doesn't have to be kind of, a super prescribed schedule there. I do tell families, if dinner is going to be like an hour and a half or 2 hours before bedtime, I often do recommend a bedtime snack, or if kids are, waking up and saying that they're hungry, having a bedtime snack would be helpful kind of before that routine starts. And like you said, I tell families, avoid sugar. Even natural sugars, like even fresh fruit, can actually cause a little sugar crash come the middle of the night. So we would want that bedtime snack to be a lot more like protein focused. Similarly, so one kid, it's actually around the 12-month mark. It doesn't have to be exactly at 12 months old, but around 12 months is when babies kind of start making the transition between milk, breast milk or formula. So milk being their main source of nutrition, to solids becoming their main source of nutrition. So it's around that time that babies make that switch. So of course, like I'm a breastfeeding mom, I'm still nursing my 14-month-old, my almost 14-month-old. So of course we can keep nursing. That's a great thing. Keep formula feeding or transition to whole milk. We're also serving her whole milk with her meals. But we actually want to start pulling it away from the bedtime routine around that 12 months of age. Just thinking like you and I as adults, we're able to kind of eat dinner. I mean, my husband and I love snacking, so we're probably going to have some sort of cheese and crackers in the evening. But we don't need to drink a huge glass of milk or have a huge, slice of pizza or bowl of fruit or cheese stick right before we lay down in bed. So it's around that 12-month age when our kids have kind of started, like I said, using solid as their main source of nutrients, that they no longer need milk in that bedtime routine. So around 12 months and then really beyond, we want to stop milk, especially whole milk, kind of after dinner time, because even whole milk has some natural sugars in it, where if kids are still drinking a warm glass of milk before bed, or even having a glass of milk with their bedtime snack, that can also cause, whether it's a little sugar crash in the middle of the night, or it could even cause some early morning wakings. So bedtime snacks are totally fine as long as they're pretty protein focused. We want to make sure kind of after dinner time, we're just offering water rather than milk.
That's really good to know, because we still are stuck on the sippy cup of milk kind of near bedtime. So, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And then I think the only other question I had was regarding autism. My oldest has autism, and he kind of gets like these random bouts of insomnia.
Yeah.
And I try like the 100% natural essential oil. He'll say, "Mama, I need the sleepy oil," which is basically just lavender. And it seems to help, but I don't know if there's any other kind of ways to help combat that.
Yeah. I know with autism, different kids, they can be all over the spectrum, and kind of what it looks like with one child might look a little bit different for the other, especially when it comes to sleep, even thinking how, with your older two and your youngest, sleep looks totally different. So similarly on the autism spectrum, sleep is going to look very different for different kids. A couple pieces that are true for other kids as well, but it can be especially helpful for kids with autism. So screen time can actually be a big hindrance to sleep in general. So with any family that I work with, I recommend keeping at least 1 hour before the bedtime routine where there is no screen time, as that blue light from the screen, like a lot of us right now with COVID are, getting headaches and whatnot from so much screen time. But that blue light that's emitted from the screen actually inhibits that release of melatonin, which helps our bodies sleep. So with any child in general, any family, I always say, please keep at least 1 hour of buffer time between screen time and going to sleep for the night. For kids with autism, we often make that even wider. Like if you can go 2 or 3 hours before bedtime without that screen time, as it's just a lot more stimulating to their brain, and it can make it a lot harder for their brains to really like calm and rest when it comes time to sleep. So screen time is a really big piece of sleep plans with the kids I work with. Like I said, that's a big kind of strategy to keep it away from, to not be close to the bedtime routine. And then similarly with that, so again, talking about routines. So routines are helpful for any child, especially kids with autism. Routines can be especially important where kind of anything that seems out of the normal routine, whether that be like, no, but mom, I brush my teeth and then eat breakfast and then watch TV, or first I get dressed and then eat breakfast. Any change in that routine can just kind of cause them to be more thrown off. So a bedtime routine is also really helpful, even again for our older kids. I think you said, is he 12 or 13?
He's like 12 and a half. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So even having a really solid bedtime routine for him would be really helpful. So again, something like starting off with a shower. If it's a night where he's not going to shower, maybe just washing his face, even washing his hands and his feet. For all kids, having some sort of experience with water at the beginning of a bedtime routine, again, is another helpful kind of reminder to his body of like, hey, sleep is coming. I don't take a shower 4 times a day. Like this is set apart for the bedtime routine. So taking some sort of shower or bath, or washing his face, his hands, and his feet. Then, brushing his teeth, going to the bathroom, getting his pajamas on. For some kids with autism, and this is definitely dependent on the child and kind of what their sensory needs are. If he enjoys touch and any sort of like grounding activity, you could even, read a chapter book with him, or, he can read a book to you or something as he's sitting in bed. But even as he's laying there, to give him some sort of little back massage, or even just like give him pressure on his back and on his legs and on his feet, just to help calm and ground his body as he is getting into bed. Like I said, some kids really enjoy that and some kids really don't. So if that's something he does not like, that certainly would not be helpful in the bedtime routine. But for older kids, that can be a helpful kind of grounding and calming activity before it's time for bed. And then similarly, so like I said, with most families, I suggest sound machines. But for some kids with autism, they can be extra sensitive to sound. And so for some, white noise actually makes it a lot harder to fall asleep because it's almost agitating to them. So I've had families that I know who have a child with autism, their child sleeps with earplugs because any sort of sound just drives them crazy. Or definitely no sound machine because they don't want anything impacting their sleep. For some, even making sure there's nothing in the room that has Wi-Fi hooked up to it, because even the like electromagnetic fields can be extra, even extra stimulating to kids who already have kind of extra high sensory needs. Mm-hmm. And so those are just a couple of pieces. Like I said, kind of every child and family is different. So when I work with families, we go through a whole questionnaire to really figure out like what is specific to your child and what are kind of the things that make them tick and the things that are really helpful to them, whether it's your 2-year-old or your 12-year-old. But so those are just a couple pieces that I would walk through with any family, but that would be extra, that I would talk about a lot more when it comes to a child with autism.
Right. Those are perfect examples too, because I feel like a lot of those things would be really helpful to him. It's not a huge issue, but sometimes it does become an issue, especially if we're breaking our routine a little bit, with the holidays and all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But he loves his head scratched. Like it's almost like annoying sometimes. He's like, Mama, scratch my head. And I'm like, again, I'm like, that would be really good if he's having a night where he's super wound up and he's just wants to calm down.
That sensory input is really helpful.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I wish I had known about you months ago.
The good thing is it's never too late.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. I'm sure I'll be messaging you again at some point. So I can share your information on Instagram, but do you want to share like your email or a good way to contact you on here?
Yeah. So my email address is lauren@viagraces.com. And when I start or start the conversation with someone, I should say. So if there's someone out there who's like, yep, I want to work with you starting today, or if there's someone who's like, I'm not sure if I'm ready for this, or I'm not sure if this is a good fit, or, would this even work for my child? Regardless of who the person is or how ready they are to go, I always start with a free 20-minute phone call to hear a little bit more about what sleep currently looks like at home, what the parents' goals are, and then I'm able to shed more light into, like, yes, it sounds like this would be a perfect fit for your child, or hey, because you're about to get a sleep study, let's wait until we have the results of that. Or a parent who says, like, I really just can't handle 1 second of crying. And I would say, hey, maybe this isn't the time for you, or, wait till your husband is not working night shift so that he can help you. But so that conversation is really helpful so that I can hear what's going on with the family. I can share more about kind of what the process would look like working together. And then from there, families either choose to, yep, I want to jump in, and we get the process moving with a questionnaire so I can gather even more information so that I can really personalize the sleep plan for the child and for the family. Or some families say, like, hey, this sounds really great, but I want to wait another month, or, we're traveling a lot over the next couple weeks. We want to wait till we get home. Or they might just say, hey, this doesn't seem like a good fit for our family right now. But that 20-minute phone call is really helpful, both for me and the family who's interested in working together. So if anyone's listening and they're interested in reaching out, you can email me at lauren@viagraces.com. I also have a website, which is simply viagraces.com, that has more information about my sleep packages. You can actually book that free 20-minute call right from my website. And so, I would love to talk to anyone who's curious to hear more, or who's wondering if this might be a good fit for their family.
That's awesome. And one thing I did read on your website was that you don't have just a cookie cutter way for every single family. It's not something you just print out that you have laying around. Like, you come up with an exact plan that will cater to that particular family's needs, which I think is great.
Yep, exactly. And that's the benefit of working together long term. So I always say, I can tell you right now, like, the perfect plan for an 8-month-old or the perfect plan for a 2.5-year-old. But when we put a child behind it who has specific needs, and a family behind it who has different scheduling needs or different hopes and goals, we're certainly going to need to change it for the child. So we're not working with robots here. Even when I personalize the most perfect plan for that family, things might need to change as we see how their child responds to it. And so staying connected to those families for those 2 or 3 weeks is really what makes the sleep plans work, because I can look at their sleep log and say, hey, yep, I saw that last night was kind of tough, but you guys did everything right. So, tonight should be a little bit better. Or I might say, hey, it looks like the schedule's not working, or let's make these tweaks here or there to really make sure the family sees success.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing on the podcast today. It was great. So much information.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. Yeah, of course. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this incredible mom story today. I really hope you enjoyed it and that it may have helped you in some way. Make sure you rate and leave a comment so I can be sure to bring you the content that you really want. Please follow the Incredible Moms podcast on Instagram, where you'll also be able to find many updates and episodes. I can't tell you how much I appreciate any support. Stay tuned for another Incredible Mom next week.